Bitcoin is close to becoming worthless.
Let's go. Now, what's the Bitcoin?
Bitcoin's like rat poison.
Yeah. Oh,
The greatest scam in history.
let's get it.
Bitcoin will go to fucking zero.
Yeah.
Alright, you ungovernable misfits. I'm your host, Max. Everybody knows that Bitcoin is useless, worthless, and doomed to fail. But what if everyone's wrong? What if it's the system that is doomed to fail? Join me as I speak to some of the brightest people in the space and slither to the deepest, darkest depths of the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Welcome back. I'm going to make this one quick. I rushed this episode out. I edited as fast as I could and pushed all the other work to the side so I could get this to you. I wanted to get this episode out because Brother Rabbit and Samourai are running a 1-sat Stowaway torch. The 5 participants picked at random who enter are going to get their own personalised paynim, and I think this is really cool. It was an absolute pleasure meeting up with Brother Rabbit. As always, we had a couple of beers and then headed to the park to record. The audio quality isn't the best. I've done everything that I possibly could to make it listenable, and I think it is now. And this one is well worth a listen. If you care about your privacy and you think it'd be cool to have your own paynim, then this is an episode for you. Make sure you give it a go. This runs until the 4th of August, so you will have one more full day to enter and hopefully win that personalised paynim. And for anyone who isn't already following Brother Rabbit, I suggest you go and do that now. Before we start, I just want to say a big thank you to my sponsors. Let's start with my newest sponsor, SX6 Metal Bitcoin Seed Phrase Backup Plates. Quite a mouthful, but very simple. You stamp your seed into steel. And you do this in case you had a fire or a flood or anything else that could fuck up those 12 or 24 words. You do not want to lose these, you want to keep them safe, and stamping them into steel is the best way you can do this. Black Coffee is the man behind SX6, so I know these things are quality. I've held them in my hand, I have felt them, and they really are amazing. So if you're upgrading your setup or you still have your backup on paper, just do better. Go to sx6.store. You can use the code MAXBBB. That'll get you 10% off your order. And you can reach out and ask me if you have any questions. But these are great, and so is Black Coffee. Go and buy some. Next up is Foundation Devices. Foundation Devices are making my favourite hardware. Not only is it the most beautifully designed, but it is fully open source, and they've just dropped the price to $199. These things really are simple to use. Any fuckwit can secure their sats properly with one of these, and they have an amazing team. If you have any problem setting one of these up, you also have the option to have Bitcoin Q&A hold your hand through the process, but honestly you're not going to need that. This is a cypherpunk tool for fuckwits. Anyone can use it. Check them out at foundationdevices.com. You can use the shill code BIT, and yeah, if you have any questions at all, you can reach out and ask me. They are a sponsor because I chased them, because I think they are the best. If you haven't already got one of these, maybe it's time to upgrade your security. Go to foundationdevices.com. Last but not least, Fast Bitcoins. Fast Bitcoins are actually, I think, sponsoring not just this show, but the Bitcoin Beach Retreat as well. Fast Bitcoins are a KYC exchange, so I do tell everyone, if you can avoid it. Go and buy in cash, go and mine, go and buy off a friend, do it peer-to-peer, then you're not going to be in the system. But I know not everyone is going to listen to that advice. Or not all of you care. Some of you want to have some KYC'd sats. If that is the case, you really need to make sure that you go to the best people possible. You want to make sure they do everything that they can to keep your data safe and to keep you secure. Fast Bitcoins do not want to hold your sats, they push you to get your sats off exchange. Once you've done that, you can go and get a passport, you can go and get one of these plates from SX6, and then you are fully self-sovereign. If you are going to go and buy some Bitcoin and you're going to use an exchange, please go to fastbitcoins.com. I don't think I have a shill code, but you can just mention me and I'm sure they'll look after you. All right, on with the show.
So this is not quite Bitcoin for the streets, it's Bitcoin for the park.
Yeah, beers in the park.
Beers in the park, wow. Screaming kids behind. So what are we doing today then? What are you teaching me?
Well, we met up today, didn't we, for a beer?
Yeah.
And at the moment on Twitter, I thought I'd organise something called the One Sat Stowaway Torch.
Okay.
So you've heard of payjoins, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Samourai has implemented into its software the ability to do a payjoin, which is a really great transaction for Bitcoin privacy. It's not something that's sort of commonly known, or it's certainly used, but the motive behind doing like a bit of a thing on Twitter is to get people more involved with, using the wallet, maybe using the tools or spending tools that they're perhaps sort of not so familiar with. So that's why I sort of kicked off this One Sat Stowaway Torch. So Stowaway, for the uninitiated, is Samourai's implementation, their own implementation of payjoin.
Okay.
So with an ordinary transaction, if you were just to sort of spend to a Bitcoin address, what tends to happen is that you merge a couple of UTXOs together in the input side of the transaction. And on the output side of the transaction, you tend to have the spend output and then the change output, which comes back to you.
Yeah.
So the cool thing about a Stowaway transaction, which is a payjoin, is if I was to pay to you, rather than you give me a Bitcoin address and I just, send some sats to you in a sort of simple method, instead I ask you to participate in the transaction. What that means is that we both work together to construct the transaction.
Okay.
And rather than just my inputs going into the transaction, even though you're receiving the amount that I want to send to you, you also provide some of your UTXOs into the transaction input.
I see. Okay, yeah. So rather than being one or two UTXOs from just the sender, the receiver's adding one into the mix as well.
Yeah. So we can do this in Samourai Wallet. You can also do this in Sparrow, and it's called a stowaway. And maybe I'll describe in a bit why it's called a stowaway. But yeah, we work in communication, if you like, between our two wallets to construct this transaction. And then on the output side of the transaction, you get your Bitcoin back that you provided into the input side of the transaction, plus the amount that I've sent to you. Yeah. And I get my change back.
Yeah.
So what this type of transaction payjoin does is it breaks
common ownership heuristics.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm a professional, aren't I?
Yeah. Common input ownership heuristic. Yeah. So this is a heuristic which you can interpret Bitcoin transactions in a certain way. Say if you see a transaction on the blockchain and it has one input and one output, that tends to be interpreted as a self-spend.
Yeah. But
it not to mean that it always is a self-spend, but that's the sort of heuristic that is, labelled against it. It's likely a self-spend.
And is that because there's no change?
Yeah, there's no change. So, you might have sent, there's a single input, a single output, so they're spending the whole UTXO. So it sort of tends to be interpreted as, well, that person or entity is probably just sending that to themselves.
Because it's unlikely that you have the exact size UTXO for the product or service.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, that is just an interpretation.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I send, sometimes it's also that transaction, one input, one output, is sometimes also referred to as a sweep spend.
Right.
But I do those spends all the time, but not to myself. you could say that, that it's almost like there's rules that are applied and the heuristics that
It's
are
a
applied.
guess that generally. But yeah, so if you have good UTXO management, you would presumably have a range of sized UTXOs.
Yeah,
so that actually quite often you would just do what they would class as a sweep, but it's actually a spend.
Yeah. You're not sort of sending it to yourself or transferring it from one Bitcoin wallet to another. You might just be paying someone or paying a service.
Yeah.
I mean, some of like the gift voucher services, you can buy gift vouchers with Bitcoin. Rather, say if you wanted to buy I don't know, like an Uber gift card or an Amazon gift card or something.
Yeah.
What you can do in that situation is, and we're going off a bit off topic here, is if I want to send a single UTXO and don't want to send it to myself, I can send it to one of these gift card sort of providers. But I can top up my account balance from that provider.
Yeah.
So rather than like just buy an Amazon gift card of like $50, and if I try to buy that directly, I might get some change back in that transaction.
Yeah.
Instead, I can just top up my gift card account.
Yeah.
Then I buy the.
You send the whole UTXO. There's no change. Yeah, makes sense.
So getting back to the payjoin Stowaway, it's a transaction that's organised between two parties, and the receiver, even though they're ultimately going to receive some Bitcoin, they're helping the sender out and they're providing inputs into the transaction, and then both the sender and the receiver get outputs from that transaction. But the cool thing about this transaction is on chain, it just looks like an ordinary spend.
Right.
It looks like often that there's been two inputs into the transaction, two outputs. And when you look at it on the on the blockchain, you have no idea that two people, two entities have constructed that transaction.
Yeah.
Provided an input each into that transaction.
Yeah.
And received an output each. It just looks like an ordinary transaction where there's been two inputs and say two outputs, and you could sort of interpret that as, one of the outputs must be the spend, one of them must be the change, but you have no idea that it's been constructed by two people, and hence it breaks this common input ownership heuristic, which usually tries to apply these sort of heuristics to the blockchain and interpret that any transaction that has one or more inputs means that those inputs belong to a single person or a single entity.
The person spending.
Yeah, but we know for a payjoin that's not the case. So we're breaking that heuristic. And then the other cool thing about a payjoin is that because the receiver is providing inputs into the transaction, when you look at the transaction on the blockchain, it's very difficult to tell in the way in which the transaction is constructed how much Bitcoin is actually being sent from party A to party B.
Right.
So that's where the name Stowaway gets its name from.
Okay.
Because this is like a really good method. If you're using Samourai Wallet or if you're using Sparrow Wallet, you can construct these transactions with either Samourai to Samourai, Sparrow to Sparrow, or Samourai to Sparrow, etc.
Yeah.
And you can pay a friend, and on the blockchain you can't. It's very difficult, sometimes if not nearly impossible, to tell how much Bitcoin is transferring from one person to the other.
So if I was going to pay you back for a beer, we could create one of these transactions.
Yeah.
And so when you say it breaks the common ownership heuristic, what you mean is it basically makes it so that chain analysis can be less and less sure. Because it's a guess in the first place.
Sure.
But now it's saying...
We know these transactions that have two inputs, that each input is owned by two different people.
Yeah.
We know it breaks the heuristic.
Yeah.
So the very fact that these payjoin transactions exist on the blockchain, we can also then say, well, what about all these other transactions that probably aren't payjoins, but we'll never know?
But could be.
It could be.
And so it makes the reliability of their guesswork less and less.
Less and less, yeah.
Valuable. Or,
scientific.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but then
valid.
One thing I always want is cool. Like, I'm not slagging off the method or anything. With a lot of this stuff, it's kind of like you have that's logical. You'd go, okay, it's not scientific, you can't be sure, and therefore you shouldn't be able to use this in a court of law or whatever they want to use it for. But sometimes if you're playing in their world, logic, as we've seen over like the last few years, logic doesn't actually matter. And so is it that say it comes up in a court case and they say, well, we think this was spend, whatever. And you say, well, it could have been a collaborative transaction. You can't know that. They might say, well, that's not how we see it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you raise a really good point. I mean, you might be familiar with the, I think his last name is Sturgeon, Roman Sturgeon, is it?
Yeah.
This case in the US where he's being, I guess, accused of running a service back in the day called Chip Mixer, I think it is.
Yeah, like a custodial mixer.
A custodial mixer, yeah. And they've arrested him and are trying to charge him under... I don't know exactly what the charges are, but no doubt it's probably to do with sort of like money transmitting licensing and being custodial, right? And he's up against it in the sense of the people, well, the inadvertent commas, the evidence, some of the evidence that's being used to try and convict him is from the firm Chainalysis. So, they've written...
Chain anal.
They've written these, reports, I guess, and provided them to the court to say, we can prove, in inadvertent commas for us, but we can prove that he is the man because of this, this, and this. But what they do is very black box. They are not open with their methodology.
Yeah.
I mean, specifically about this, about this case, did you hear Samourai Wallet on one of the podcasts speaking about this? So I think from what I heard on that podcast with Samourai Wallet, the OXT guys are trying to help out Roman's defense team to have a look to see what's been put into the court conviction sort of statements and trying to pick apart any sort of heuristics that have perhaps been used to convict Roman. And then getting back to this sort of stowaway thing, I don't know the ins and outs of exactly what examples they're trying to convict Roman with. But, going back to the stowaway thing, well, let's just say, for example, Chainalysis have provided some evidence to the court in Roman's case that, oh, well, you can see this transaction here. Perhaps this was Roman's, or perhaps this was so-and-so's, or, we can see this transaction here. The inputs to the transaction are owned by the same entity, and therefore we can conclude that this input belongs to the same person as the next input into the transaction. But what we know is that a payjoin can be constructed by two. It can actually be constructed by two or more people. Yeah. But in the case of a stowaway, it's two people. Payjoin can be constructed by two people, so that immediately breaks that assumption. How do you know that transaction? How can you, with any certainty, beyond a reasonable doubt, can you prove that transaction on the blockchain hasn't been constructed by two people?
And if the legal system acted in the way it is advertised, which is innocent until proven guilty, which it doesn't really, but if it did, then you'd be able to say, well, you can't prove this, you're guessing at this, and therefore we have to. And so I get your point, it's like, even if they are cunts, and they are cunts, and even if they do lie and they do weasel through things and they fuck around, at the end of the day, the more people who use something like a stowaway or any type of payjoin, the more it muddies the waters. And
the more it becomes common practice.
Yeah. And then so you can say, well, this is something that is done often enough that, because if it was only ever done once, it'd be like, well, we still think that the likelihood is it's not. But if it becomes more and more common practice, and it probably doesn't even have to be that much of a percentage to be...
No, not at all. Just the very fact that we know that payjoins exist on the blockchain can cast doubt on all the other transactions that perhaps aren't payjoins, but we'll never know.
So basically, the more we do, the less strong they become, the more difficult it becomes for them. Okay, so I'm paying you back for a beer.
Yeah.
Which I'm not actually, because was it Din who said he'd give us a beer?
Yes.
Thank you, Din. Appreciate it. It was very nice. So I'm actually not paying Rabbit back for a beer. But let's say I was. I want to send you some sats. Obviously, the upside is like, I'm doing this collaborative transaction with you. It makes things harder for the surveillance companies. What's the downsides? Are there any other than presumably just transaction costs? Fees maybe are higher?
Negligible. In terms of a stowaway transaction, the transaction fees aren't necessarily higher. You are using more inputs
Data.
into more inputs into the
Right.
transaction. So therefore, the more inputs and the more inputs, more outputs you have in a transaction, the more expensive the miner fees are. But for the sake of paying a few more sats for your miner fees, you're getting a direct return in terms of privacy.
Yes.
Both the sender and receiver are gaining that on-chain privacy.
You're gaining privacy personally, and you're also, if you care about Bitcoin, and I like to think people who listen to this podcast specifically do care about Bitcoin, not just the number going up. You care about the fact that this can actually be a money that you can use and can't be taken and can be spent how you want and all the rest of it. Then you're not only protecting your own privacy and the person you're sending to, which presumably a friend or someone you know or a business you know, but you're also making the whole Bitcoin ecosystem stronger, and you're taking power away from these cunts who are trying to put people in prison who shouldn't be there.
Yeah,
And so
just
you
doing
can
your
look at-
part.
Yeah, you're doing your bit.
And also, it's beneficial to you as well. Like, not only is it beneficial to cast out other transactions on the blockchain, but you're getting a
You're
very
more
good
private.
return. In terms of the downside of a payjoin, that there is perhaps a small downside. It can be mitigated, and it depends as well who you're doing the transaction with. So let me describe. So if you're sending to me, okay, and we're constructing this payjoin together, you're sending to me, so I'm providing you with an input. One of my UTXOs is an input into the transaction, okay? So you could look that transaction back up on the blockchain, and you could go, oh, that's Rabbit's input.
Mm-hmm.
So, perhaps I provide you a large input, and you go, oh, shit, that's how much Rabbit's got.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's outputs in the transaction. So you've one of the outputs is mine, one of the outputs is yours.
Yeah.
You can then go, oh, I know that the first output was Rabbit's.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep an eye on that output
Okay.
and see what happens with it. See if he spends it. See if he does some further merges with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'll come back to how we can, me and you could both mitigate the privacy considerations between the sender and receiver. But for a stowaway in particular, and any sort of payjoin, the sender and receiver should be conscious that because we're both sharing in that transaction, we're sharing UTXO information with each other.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, here's an input of mine.
Yeah.
Use this to construct the transaction with one of your inputs.
Yeah.
And then on the output side, I get an output and you get an output. Well, it's not necessarily.
But I'm going to see that anyway.
Well,
If you send me from a large UTXO to pay for the bit, I can still see that and go, this cunt's got loads of money. he can get the next round.
Sure.
So surely it's not that different, is it?
The alternative, look, there's the alternative to that, right? Is if I'm paying you, not doing a stowaway or a payjoin, and instead I say, oh, hey, Max, just send me a Bitcoin address, I'll pay you back for that beer.
Yeah.
Okay. I send you, what's the cost of the beer these days? What's it about? 15
quid.
I just send you, a small amount of Bitcoin to that address. Okay. You've not provided any input into that transaction. It's not a payjoin.
Yeah.
And then it's up to you in the future then to go, okay, I've received this small amount of Bitcoin for the beer from Rabbit. I'm going to label that. I'm going to add a label to that transaction. So you are right. When you're transacting, you should still be labeling.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of saying, like, in a stowaway and a payjoin, you have to be conscious about, and we may be getting into the weeds here because this is the sort of things that I think you don't wholly need to be aware of, but just considering it is maybe important. But between the sender and the receiver, you're not really the sender isn't gaining any sort of privacy from the receiver as such. The receiver isn't really gaining much privacy from the sender. But what the two parties are both gaining
It's privacy from the people
blockchain.
spying on everyone else.
Exactly, because you can't tell that transaction was constructed by two people. You can't. It's very difficult to tell how much Bitcoin was sent from party A to party B because it's a payjoin, right?
I don't see that as a downside then.
And then further to add to that is that with Samourai Wallet and Sparrow Wallet, you can choose, if you were to send Bitcoin to me, you can choose which account you spend that Bitcoin from.
Right.
And I can choose what account, because I'm receiving it, I can choose what account to provide a UTXO to you from.
Yeah.
So hence, I mean, reading between, hopefully people listening have read between the lines, in Samourai and Sparrow, you can choose Bitcoin from your postmix account from Whirlpool.
Yeah.
So already, if you're using like the tools
as you should
be, you should be using, privacy best practices, spending from postmix.
Yeah.
You'd have already mixed your Bitcoin before this.
So it's effectively, it's like we're both putting an input from postmix, which is already
should have a good level of privacy because it's gone through Whirlpool. So you're already in a great starting position.
So we're not giving each other any more information than we would in any other transaction, and we've got good privacy. And then we're no worse off in any way other than potentially it's a few more sats to do the transaction. But as we've said, it's better privacy overall for all the reasons that we've covered. And it gives you privacy from the prying eyes that you really don't want. So I don't see that as a down. The only there's loads of upsides.
Well, the thing is with privacy is it's a sliding scale. Yeah. It's often I'll get a question as to like, is this the best thing to do, or am I safe?
Yeah.
Am I safe? And there are, I hate using this phrase, it's used too much, but there are trade-offs. There are good things and bad things to certain things. And when someone asks me a question, I don't want to just turn around and say, oh no, you're fine, mate. Like, if they truly want to understand the ins and outs, and that's why I was talking about there's little, you could interpret it as there's little privacy between the sender and receiver, but you get good privacy on chain. So that's good. But, just mentioning that in passing might actually light a few light bulbs for a few people and think, I'll think about that when I do it, or I'll look into that and understand it a little bit more. So, it is a complicated topic, but I think that it doesn't have to be complicated. And Samourai's implementation of payjoin, of which Sparrow has later implemented a couple of years after Samourai did. So when you actually go to do a stowaway, it's really easy.
Should we do one?
Yeah, so I'm running this. I say I'm running. It was just a sort of a tweet. I try and get some people to try and use stowaways, because a lot of people haven't done one before, or aren't really familiar with exactly how to do one. So it's a good barrier to entry to just try it out. Before we do this, do you know the other implementation where you can spend and do a payjoin?
What, you mean Sparrow?
If you wanted to spend to a company.
Yeah, isn't there a payjoin in BTC Pacer?
That's correct. Yeah. So
we have it on Ungovernable Misfits.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I think we're one of the few.
Yeah. And what that requires you to have a hot wallet on your BTC Pay server.
Yeah.
So when someone wants to pay you, you've got a hot wallet running on your server,
which has to have funds in it.
Has to have funds in it because you as the receiver are providing an input into the transaction, right? So the Samourai Wallet doesn't work quite the same as BTC Pay server, but it does require both parties to be online, right? And there's two methods you can do a stowaway in Samourai. When Samourai first implemented this into Samourai Wallet a fair few years ago now, let's just say the UX and user flow, it wasn't as pretty.
Yeah.
And we're going to do one of those now. It's called a manual stowaway. Because what we want to do in the transaction, let's go for it. So I'm going to send to you. So I'm going to send one sat to you.
Okay.
And I'll talk you through it. And this isn't good for radio, is it?
Actually, I think it is, because it's real world. We're going to do this sat in a park.
Maybe you can put some music over the top.
Elevator
music, yeah.
We've been adding quite a lot of music into our Plug Miner Monthly. Makes it just a bit more enjoyable.
Sorry, what show's that?
That's just this shit show. Some fucking cunt called John that I run it with. He's American, so he's obviously an irritating guy, but he knows a bit about mining.
Okay, so I'm going to send to you. So what happens when we do this transaction? What we need to do is I need to pass some information to you.
Yeah.
you need to pass some information to me, and we go back and forth.
Yeah.
Because we need to share information about how we're going to construct this transaction with each other. Okay. So the first implementation the first thing of how Samourai put it into the wallet is called a manual cahoots. Okay. So if you tap on your pay name in the top left, and you go to collaborate, tap on participate. Okay. Right, and just hold it there for a moment. So on my screen, I'm sending to you, so I'm going to initiate the stowaway.
Let's do that again slower.
Okay, so
For people listening, you open your Samourai Wallet.
so you're receiving, so you open your Samourai Wallet.
Right. Your pay name's in the top left-hand corner.
Yeah.
Little picture of a cute robot. You press that, and then the second tab down, collaborate. Click.
Okay, and you've got two options now. You've got on your screen initiate or participate.
Participate.
So you want to tap on participate.
Participate.
Okay, and just hold that thought.
Yeah.
So I've done the same. I've tapped on collaborate.
Yeah.
I've tapped on initiate because I'm sending the stowaway.
Yeah.
So I'm going to select transaction type stowaway.
Yeah.
And I'm going to send what's called a manual stowaway.
Okay.
And so I tap stowaway and I tap manual, right?
Okay.
I'm going to select to send from my Postmix account. So I've done that. And now I'm going to put in the amount.
You should always do from Postmix.
I mean, look.
Unless you have ideal world.
There are good arguments to say that you could receive a stowaway to your non-Postmix account in certain instances. So say if you've got some... I would always recommend it, if in doubt, use Postmix. And I'm going to say that straight up front because I don't want you to say, oh, but you said. Always use Postmix. But you could arguably say there are some instances where if you have some doxic change, which is a small amount of Bitcoin that is still associated with its past. Yeah. It's not been large enough to go into Whirlpool. If you construct a transaction, if you're a receiver of a stowaway and you provide the doxic change into the transaction as an input, then if you were to look at that transaction on chain as chain analysis, chain analysis firm or whoever, they could see that doxic change as the input, and then they could see another input, which is actually my input to the transaction, and they'd probably conclude that both those inputs belong to the same person.
Yeah.
But they don't. So using your doxic change as an input into a stowaway is actually a good privacy-preserving method, because now when it comes to the output, there's more sort of fuckery that's going on. The spend amount isn't wholly obvious on changes to how much is sent from one person to another. So, that transaction you've helped construct could be interpreted as it's a single entity, but it's actually not, and you've used doxic change.
The only thing is you're giving your doxic change to someone
who's sending it.
So you have to trust that person. Let's say you put your life savings through Whirlpool and you have doxic change.
Yeah, that doxic change is associated with that Whirlpool TX0. So a TX0 is the transaction you send when you want to send sats into Whirlpool, right?
So don't meet a Bitcoiner at a event for the first time and decide to do this for a beer and dox yourself for your life savings, because that's dumb.
Yeah.
But I see what you mean.
But all I mean is there are some instances where you could have doxic change or small amounts of Bitcoin that have been obtained here or there for whatever reason. There can be some utility in using them.
I get you.
From your non-mixed account. Yeah. But generally, I would just always advise use your post-mix account for everything because you can't shoot. There's less amount of shooting yourself in the foot over this sort of thing, right? Okay, so you're waiting on the participate screen. I've just constructed on the initiate screen. I've gone stowaway manual because we're going to do a manual stowaway, and I've selected. I'm going to send you one sat. So I'm going to hit review transaction setup and I'm going to go begin transaction. Right, now this is a manual stowaway, so you want to tap those three dots in the top. Select Postmix account. Yeah, so you're participating, so you'll select Postmix account. Tap the three dots in the top right. Yeah. And hit
payload.
Oh, I've told you this wrong. Okay, so I'm sorry. So we're going to go back to the deposit screen. I should know better. So we're going to go back to the deposit screen, right, and tap the QR code scanner. This is a general QR code.
All the way back to the beginning.
Yeah, I ballsed it up, haven't I?
Let's do this bit again. So we're on the front screen.
Yeah. So you want to go to your Postmix account. So you tap on the three dots. You're going to your Postmix transactions account.
Postmix account. Yeah.
Okay. And then tap the scanner.
Tap the QR scanner.
Yep.
So we've gone from the main screen to post-mix, and now we're going QR scanner.
Perfect.
Grant,
Yeah.
access.
So you've granted permissions to the QR code
Okay.
scanner. Okay, so I've started to construct the transaction. I'm on step 1 of 5.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to show you my QR code. You scan this QR. Okay. So now you've scanned my first QR because
Yeah.
I've constructed the transaction, and
Yeah.
now you go, step number 2, you've got to show me your QR. So all we're
You've
doing...
shown me yours, I'll show you mine.
So what we're doing here is we're sharing data between... So we're not... All we're doing, we're just constructing the transactions via data that we're passing between each other via QR codes.
Do we need an internet connection for this or not? I need to talk to the node.
No, you don't need... So the sender needs an internet
Right.
connection. No, technically neither of you need an internet connection, but you need a way to broadcast the transaction
Fine.
afterwards.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, you could do that via, like, the TX tenor stuff, like the Go
Yeah.
tenor stuff, but yeah, you've somehow got to broadcast the
Yeah.
transaction.
Okay.
Okay, so I've scanned yours, so
Yeah.
I'm on step 3, so if you just click on there.
Yeah.
Right, you want to launch your QR code scanner again? Right, you've got a scanner.
So I press launch QR.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, we'll keep going. So basically, we're just scanning each other's QR code scanners.
Yeah.
And you keep
Show
going.
QR.
So you're on step 4, so you show your QR.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to scan your QR again. And all this is doing is passing information to and from each of our phones to construct this 2-person, if you like, coin join or
Yeah.
payjoin. And now I'm on the last screen. I'm on step 5 of 5.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're ready to broadcast.
Okay.
Okay, so I hit send. I can see the amount that's being sent and the total miner fee. So I'm going to send. I'm going to broadcast this transaction. And without using a server, we have constructed that 2-person payjoin between the two of us.
When you say without using a server, that's because we're sat next to
We're
each
sat
other.
next to each other,
So there's no data being passed other than...
us scanning QR codes.
Yeah.
Okay. So there we go. We can see if you exit, if you just close that down and go back.
Yeah.
Yep, you go back and then you go back again and
Yeah.
we refresh. I can see it on mine because mine's already refreshed.
Okay.
But I can see here a transaction going, and the amount of Bitcoin I can see going out is the miner fee plus how much I've sent to you,
Yeah.
which is 1 sat.
So what was the miner fee to send that 1 sat?
It was 1,512 sats.
Okay.
So yeah, Kahoot success, as they say.
So that serverless part,
Mm-hmm.
I keep seeing a load of stuff on Twitter about serverless payjoin,
Mm-hmm.
HRF serverless payjoin grants.
Yeah.
Is it that they're looking for an implementation of serverless payjoin because they don't know that it exists, or they're not happy with what already exists, or because it seems like that works? We've just done it. I fuck everything up, and that worked.
I don't. Yeah. So for those that maybe don't know, the Human Rights Foundation have put some sort of grant bounties out.
Bounty. Yeah.
One of them was to implement a sort of a serverless payjoin, which is a different implementation to Samourai. There was a little bit of sort of, let's say, hoo-ha on Twitter about it, because I, for one, would say sort of...
Why have more than one standard?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm all for different standards and stuff, but when something works so well, it already exists in Sparrow. If you're going to encourage people to implement stuff into wallets, just encourage them to implement something that already exists and works, and it's already got like a bootstrap of users out there who are already using it.
Well, because you already have Samourai, best mobile wallet, Sparrow, best desktop wallet, both using it. So what you're saying is, rather than try and fucking reinvent the wheel, just say, guys, look, we've got this thing, it's the wheel, it's really fucking useful.
Yeah.
Why don't you put it into your wallet and we'll all work on the same standard, rather than create a new...
Yeah.
Because it was quite a lot of sats as well. Rather than say, right, your bounty is to create a whole new implementation, it's just, why don't they say, there's a bounty for every wallet that implements it?
Well, I think there is that, but I don't think you can have this sort of debate and conversation without sort of also saying that there's some really cool features in various Bitcoin wallets. I mean, I'm a big fan of like Samourai and like their Paynim stuff that they've pioneered over the years, right? If something works and it's a great feature, why aren't people or teams sort of incentivized to implement other features from other wallets
Yeah.
without sort of needing to claim a bounty to do so? If you want to attract users, you should be already putting in the features that are helpful and useful for your users, right? And paynims is a big one for that.
Yeah.
It's arguably one of the most useful features in a Bitcoin wallet, but why? The argument would maybe perhaps be tongue in cheek from my part is, oh well, they're not that good. Why would we want to put that in? But the truth is, paynims are fucking wicked.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Why aren't they in every Bitcoin wallet? And I don't know
how many people you've got them in Samourai. You got them in Sparrow. You got them in the Duo wallet.
Yeah, Stack Duo.
And then the only other one that I know of is Lincoin Pool.
For paynim withdrawals, that's correct.
Yeah. And that's why we have them as a sponsor, is because I reached out to Mehdi and was like, you fucking legend.
Yeah.
You've actually done this. No one else has bothered.
And it actually solves a
real problem.
A real sort of address reuse problem from mining payouts. So,
no one else.
I just think that sometimes... Look, the on the other side of this sort of coin of like grants, Bitcoin grants, and maybe sort of be the last to sort of say of it really, is that why do any decent development on software products in general at all? Why not just sit on your ass, wait for the grants to come up, and then only work on what those grants are asking for? Isn't that's a good way to make some money? I'm not saying that should be done, but I'm saying, you should be working on the stuff that brings users in, and try to monetize in a fashion that actually is brings tools to users that really want them and demand them, and rather than just working on things that it's that sort of with the HRF grants that are going out, they're listing all these things that I don't think a lot of them are useful, should even be a consideration to give some, really, real lot of money away for these things that probably aren't going to be much used or even desired. I mean, it's the free market to decide what is useful and what isn't. And if you're not listening to your users and implementing the things that your users are desiring, then you need to think about what you are working on. So I think there's an element of not being incentivized for the wrong reasons to work on something that because it pays.
You should do it the other way around, where if I win the lottery, I'll just make a "you've made cool shit" a reverse grant. Like, you've already made it. Here you are. I'm just going to give you some sats because it's fucking cool what you've built.
Yeah.
And then it makes people maybe think more outside the box, because they're like, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if?" And then they just go, "Yeah, it would be cool, I'll build that," rather than, "Wouldn't it be cool if?" "Yeah, but that doesn't pay, whereas this other thing pays." Is it really that cool? Is it really that good? I don't know, but it pays.
Yeah. Look, I'm all for developers getting some money, but I think that does with grants comes along sort of misaligned incentives.
Okay. Well, anyway, the point is there is an implementation that works, and we've literally just done it, and it worked, and it's gone through.
Yeah, and we did that without using a server. That's the important thing, right? Okay, so I've sent one sat to you.
Yeah.
Okay, and as I say, what we just did a manual stowaway. After Samourai Wallet implemented manual stowaways, as we've seen here, we have to be in person to exchange those QR codes to construct that payjoin together. So I sent one sat to you. So now I want you to send one sat back to me. But this time,
I'm keeping that.
This time, so after manual stowaway, Samourai came up with something really cool, which allows us to construct this transaction, but not sitting on a park bench together.
Okay.
They developed something called Soroban. That's the name of it. You might have heard of it. Yeah. So it's an app agnostic. So that means that it's not necessarily tied to Samourai Wallet. It's a anybody could use this protocol. So
And
it's
it's like an encrypted messaging
over Tor.
protocol.
Yeah, so encrypted messaging protocol over Tor called Soroban. And what happens? We're going to construct this transaction again. You're going to send one sat to me, but instead we're going to do what's called an online cahoots.
Yeah.
So where we were scanning each other's QR codes back and forth, almost like sort of doing a bit of a PSBT with a hardware wallet, right?
Yeah.
But instead of us constructing that doing QR codes, we're going to do it online, right?
So we're passing data manually, and now we're going to do it through a server.
Through the Soroban communication protocol, and our wallets are going to talk to each other automatically. And where it was like one QR scan, the next one to me, the next one to you, we'll both see on our screen. It will go from 1 to 5, and it will be like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then on 5, because you're sending to me, you then hit the send button.
Okay,
and that's it.
Fine.
So let's give it a go.
All right. So open my Samourai Wallet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So mine's just loading up. Right. So we got sidetracked before, but you can see the first transactions coming to you, can't you? That I sent to you.
Yeah.
So what you've received there, it doesn't look on screen like you've received one sat. It looks like you've actually received the input that you provided into the transaction.
Yeah.
Plus the one sat.
Yeah.
So right, you describe what you're doing.
Okay.
So you're going to do the same thing.
Yeah. So I'm clicking on my little paynim.
Yeah.
Top left. Then collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
Then initiate.
Yes.
Which is on the left. Transaction type underneath it.
Stowaway. Next one down.
Stowaway. Yeah. So click Stowaway, and then online.
Yep. So you could have either picked in person or online. So now you need to select the collaborator.
Okay, collaborator.
Because you need to tell it who to reach out to collaborate with.
Right.
So for the collaborator, we use paynims as a wallet identifier. So when you speak through the Soroban communication method, you're basically sending out a message to say, "I'm looking for Rabbit.
Yeah.
I want to initiate a transaction with you." So you've got to select my paynim from the collaborator.
Right, let's add you.
There you go. We're back on the collaborate screen. So you've done a stowaway online. You need to select and find Rabbit.
Rabbit.
Perfect. Now carry on tapping on the next selection.
Yeah. Set up transaction.
Okay, so you want to go from postmix.
Postmix.
And then you want to send me 0.000000001.
Yeah. Right. Done.
Okay, you can leave that at the standard mine if you, 7 sats per byte? Yeah, that'll do. 7 sats per byte.
Right.
Okay, so before you do that, I'm going to get ready to listen, because I need to listen over Soroban for you to initiate this transaction with me. So we don't have to be in the same location. I just hit collaborate, participate. I'm going to participate from my postmix account. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit listen for Cahoots request. Right.
Okay.
Go for it. So you send it to me.
Transaction setup.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Tap begin transaction.
Begin transaction.
Okay. So you can see on screen it's going 1 to 5. So that's your paynim. It says you want to Kahoot.
Yeah.
So it says Max wants to Kahoot with you using Stowaway CoinJoin. So this is the notification I've seen. Would you like to collaborate in this transaction? So I hit yes. Now this will happen quite quick. So let's watch on both our screens.
All right.
Right. It goes 1 out of 5.
Yeah.
You can see it says Cahoots request accepted.
Yeah.
It's gone 2 out of 5. 3 out of 5. 4 out of 5.
Ooh.
Oh, we're in sync. And on
5 out of 5.
5 out of 5. And on your screen,
send.
There you go.
Bang. Send. Are you sure you want to transact? Yes. Broadcasting.
Transaction
sent.
Kahoot success.
Ooh.
So, where we did like that QR code shuffling before, doing a manual stowaway, we've communicated over Tor.
Yeah.
And we've used our paynims as wallet identifiers.
Okay.
So there we are.
That's slick.
It's pretty handy, isn't it? And that's kind of the reason why I've done this sort of like trying to get people to pass one sat from one person to the next, to the next, to the next, doing stowaways.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of people haven't done one before or are not familiar with the collaborate menu in Samourai or in Sparrow.
Yeah.
So, it's just to get people familiar with doing payjoins more often.
How many have you had so far? Not including ours?
Not including ours, last I checked, was, I think it was 31.
Okay.
31 passes of the torch.
And how
so
much
far.
longer have you got?
So it's going to, I mean, people can continue doing it for as long as they want.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I put till Friday, and then I don't know when you'll get this out, so maybe people might want to jump in and try and grab the torch as quickly as possible.
I'll be lucky if I get this out by Friday.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, guys, you've missed out, because if you'd have partaken in the passing of the torch, Samourai Wallet retweeted my tweet, because I've been keeping track of each of the pass. I think we were like 2 or 3 passes in by then. He retweeted my tweet saying, for 5 participants chosen at random to get a custom paint in and a custom avatar.
Nice.
So if you're listening to this now, then
it's too late.
It's too late.
Tough shit. I'll try and get it out, because that is quite cool to have a little custom.
No pressure.
Unlikely.
No pressure. No pressure. Oh, it was a pleasure. Thanks for that.
Yeah, hopefully that helps people. And even if I don't get this out by Friday, people can do it. Every time you're paying someone who uses Sparrow or Samourai and you're paying them, give it a go.
I mean, it's taken us a little bit longer than I think it would obviously, usually, because we've just, been talking about it. But once you know exactly where to go into, right, I want to send a Stowaway to you, cool, I'll start listening, and I just construct the transaction and hit initiate.
Yeah.
So, yeah, try it out. Maybe you have to get some friends first, some Panem friends.
That's the hard bit.
Or direct people to use Samourai and Sparrow. I think one thing, actually, I've just remembered, I guess in inverted commas, downside to Stowaways is because if I send to you and you're providing an input into the transaction, you, of course, need to have Bitcoin in your wallet to receive a Stowaway. Yeah. So it's not a very good onboarder.
No, this is for people who are already involved.
They've already got Bitcoin in their wallet.
Yeah.
Hopefully in post-mix, they've whirlpooled some coins.
So anyone who's using Samourai or Sparrow and they are using Bitcoin, when you're paying each other back or whatever, then this is something you should try.
Thanks, Max.
All right, mate. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no technical difficulties with...
That's amazing. It's because you're sat here. Yeah. I honestly was like, this is definitely going to fucking go wrong. 100%. But no, very impressed. Cool. Close it out. Thank you, mate.
Cheers. No worries.